and was alone in bed on the newspapers. But man is not made for defeat, he said.
Important line.
Man can be destroyed, but not defeated. I'm sorry that I killed the fish, though, he thought. Now the bad time is coming, and I do not even have the harpoon. The Dentuso is cruel and able and strong and intelligent, but I was more intelligent than he was. Perhaps not, he thought. Perhaps I was only better armed. Don't think, old man, he said aloud. Sail on this course and take it when it comes. But I must think, he thought, because it is all I have left. That and baseball. I wonder how the great DiMaggio would have liked the way I hit him in the brain. It was no great thing, he thought. Any man could do it. But do you think my hands were as great a handicap as the bone spurs? I cannot know. I never had anything wrong with my heel except the time the stingray stumbled when I stepped on him when swimming and paralyzed the lower leg and made the unbearable pain. Think about something cheerful, old man, he said. Every minute now you are closer to home. You sail lighter for the loss of 40 pounds. He knew quite well the pattern of what could happen when he reached the inner part of the current. But there was nothing to be done now. Yes, there is, he said aloud. I can lash my knife to the butt of one of the oars. So he did that with the tiller under his arm and the sheet of the sail under his foot. Now, he said, I am still an old man, but I am not unarmed. The breeze was fresh now, and he sailed on well. He watched only the forward part of the fish, and some of his hope returned. It is silly not to hope, he thought. Besides, I believe it is a sin. Do not think about sin, he thought. There are enough problems now without sin. Also, I have no understanding of it. I have no understanding of it, and I am not sure that I believe in it. Perhaps it was a sin to kill the fish. I suppose it was, even though I did it to keep me alive and feed many people. But then everything is a sin. Do not think about sin. It's much too late for that, and there are people who are paid to do it. Let them think about it. You were born to be a fisherman, as a fish was born to be a fish. San Pedro was a fisherman,
Destiny, we might
as was
say.
the father of the great DiMaggio. But he liked to think about all things that he was involved in, and since there was nothing to read and he did not have a radio, he thought much, and he kept on thinking about sin. You did not kill the fish only to keep alive and to sell for food, he thought. You killed him for pride and because you are a fisherman. You loved him when he was alive, and you loved him after. If you love him, it is not a sin to kill him. Or is it more? You think too much, old man, he said aloud. But you enjoyed killing the Dentuso, he thought. He lives on live fish as you do. He is not a scavenger nor just a moving appetite as some sharks are. He is beautiful and noble and knows no fear of anything. I killed him in self-defense, the old man said aloud. And I killed him well.
Okay, we're getting close to being done with this part today. You might want to jot down, why does he keep thinking about sin? He caught this fish, and he knows he can't bring the whole thing in. So, which sin is it?
Huh?
Which sin is it? Why does he keep thinking of sin?
Murder.
Murder, pride.
How is the pride of sin?
Pride is considered a sin.
How? By the Catholic Church, it's called a sin. Why?
And Santiago
This
is
the
Catholic.
first sin, right? By the way, Mr. Workman, this is answering your question. Why didn't the old man just kill sharks? What's the answer?
Because he didn't want to kill the fish.
Fish is dead.
Wait, why didn't he do this?
You can't kill all the sharks, can you?
He lost the harpoon.
Well, the whole goal is prize. The prize is the fish.
So why didn't he just take one of the first instead?
It doesn't
Well,
sell.
he's already got a big fish on his
Right.
hook. I don't think he untied. Why,
Yeah, where
why
did he
didn't
put
he
the shark?
untie the fish?
They already put a 20-foot shark.
It wasn't 20 feet. The shark wasn't 20 feet.
Oh no. This was a smaller shark.
Yeah.
This one was about the same
Yeah,
size.
why did he just take the shark? Just untied that.
Another thing, the sharks came and what did they do to the fish?
They ate it.
Good chunk of it. So now he's looking at his great prize and it's been mangled.
So if you did switch it, then he would shark by sharks. Because there's no
And as a fisherman though, I don't think that a shark is as much of a prize as this would be. They don't usually go out and fish for sharks. So we all caught up? Yeah. Let's write down that we were on 106 or 107? 106.
All right, we are now ready to move on to our annotation work. We have a half an hour of that. We want all handhelds put away and stay away now for the next 30 minutes while we are focusing on our annotation work. You want a blank sheet of paper out right now. We're going to set up the annotation page and then we will turn to our assigned text for the hour. Just to remind, we are in the first part of our session, always working with the reading of a text where we are listening to the text. Ms. Laird is helping you to work through that text. Now we're working with Hemingway. Later it will be with the great writer Shakespeare. But after we finish then that work, we turn to specific annotation practice using a text. Let's now go ahead and take out a blank sheet of paper, as we always will do. This will be the second page of your packet. You will want to log in. Let's do this now quickly. Log in. You're using red ink anytime you're working with annotation. And we will log in with your name, today's date, the title of the text, and the page number we will get to in a moment. But first I want to set up, if I could with you, the annotation page itself. Whereas before, when we were working, we had our kind of demo copy. If you need to look at that, feel free to. But now we will actually outline this annotation page. And from here on out, you ought to be able to do this by yourself then as you're getting ready for our presentation. 3 levels of reading. Take a look at your 3-ring notebook page. Do you see that red line down the left-hand side? To the left of that line, you want to number 1, skip a few lines, 2A, skip a few lines, 2B, skip a few lines, 3A, skip a few lines, and 3B. Okay? And you should be able to do that, Mr. Workman, all on the front of one page, especially when we are working with such short texts as we always do in the half hour of conversation. Next, we want to make sure of what those numbers represent. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. Level 2, Level 3, we divide into 2 parts. Let's just remind ourselves real quickly of what they're called. At Level 1, what does the text say? You might write the word say with a question mark. This is our summary work. Level 2A, remember at Level 2 we're answering the question, what does the text mean? And at 2A, we're working with themes, messages. At 2B, we're working with the topic of rhetoric. R-H-E-T-O-R-I-C. In other words, we're working with literary techniques, you might say. Not what the author says, but how the author says it. At level 3, we're answering the question, how does this text relate to other texts I'm familiar with? And at 3A, we're asking about how does it relate to other texts. 3B, how does this text relate to me personally? Okay? Now, once you have that filled out, and from this point on, when I say, let's get ready now to go to our next annotation study, you just want to take out a blank sheet of paper and you just want to do what you just did real quickly. So that way, the only thing remaining for me is the question I believe that maybe Mr. Workman had a few minutes ago. Namely, what is the page I should be at in this book, and what is the title of that text? Let's go to it now. Open your hymnal in front of you, and we'll be working out of this hymnal for a few days, to page 793. To page 793. So that orange book that you have in front of you there, 793. Now it is possible that sometimes the texts that I will select, you have already been introduced to in another class, in another setting or whatever. That's fine. That's fine. In fact, it's to your advantage if you have looked at a text. We are now on page 793, and the title of this text is actually Hope is the Thing with Feathers. You can abbreviate, Mr. Workman, the title here to simply Hope. You should write that in your login information now. Okay? The reason why it's so important that you follow our instructions here is that for you to get your checkoff for a session, you've got to go through the process of finishing the session. Or you're going to be obligated in that week following the 3rd of July to come in the afternoons and continue work so that you can get your credit. So you really want to pay attention to some of the logistics here. Once you've got the rhythms down, you're able to follow them fairly simply. Now I'm ready to begin with an introductory comment or two about this text. And again, all we're doing is working with this text. Now I need you to drop your pens for just a second. I need you to all eyes to look at me. I need you to hear what I'm about to say. I am very pleased that by July the 3rd or the week thereafter, you will have your credits so that you then are obliged to be able to qualify. One more English class is finished for you. I'm very happy about that. But that's not why you're here. The reason you're here is so I can help you learn a little bit better how to read actively, academically, so that in about 80 days, when you come back to Worland High School and begin your English class, and an assignment is given to you for reading, you will have a little better understanding of how to approach that reading. That's what we're doing. Got me? I will use text to try and help you learn how to do that. So, let's now go to it. Annotation of Emily Dickinson, and we want to write her name down. She is the authoress of this text. And the title again is Hope is the Thing with Feathers. Now, for those of you who are about to be juniors, you will be studying great American authors. One of those great American authors is Emily Dickinson. I should point out just a small amount about who this woman is. Dickinson was agoraphobic. Now, I'm not expecting you to write that word down. I mean, you can try if you want to.
Agoraphobic means you're afraid of blood and stuff.
No, but I appreciate the guess.
Okay.
Mr. McAfee, agoraphobic means what? Are you familiar?
Oh, no.
It means what?
Fear of the outside world.
It does. Fear of the outside world. In other words, if you are an individual who doesn't like to go outside when there's lots of people around, you don't like to come to Worland High School and walk the halls because there's lots of people, you are agoraphobic. Phobic, by the way, just simply means fear of, right? Agoraphobic, over-related to the agora, which was the Greek word for the mall, believe it or not. In other words, if you hate going to malls and you're in a Greek culture, you are agoraphobic. Got me? Dickinson, fascinating character. She lives her whole life. Are you ready for this, Mr. Denise? She lives her whole life, Dickinson, pretty much in her house. The whole time she's writing. She's actually writing the whole time. No one really knows. When she dies, Mr. Nash, we're now on page 793 of your purple hymnal. Orange hymnal. And we're now working with the annotation process. You might want a blank sheet of paper out now for the annotation process. And I'm just now giving some introductory comments on Emily Dickinson, pointing out that she was agoraphobic. That is to say, she never liked to go outside. She was writing her whole life, but nobody knew about it. When she dies, they go into her bedroom to throw away her stuff. She has hundreds of these little tied up bundles of paper. And those papers have writing on them. The writing is really bad handwriting. So bad nobody can read the stuff. They almost, are you ready for this? They almost throw it away. Thankfully for us, they don't. And then they begin to read this stuff and they're like, whoa, Emily's been writing poetry the whole time. That is why, Mr. McAfee, when you find a collection of poems by Emily Dickinson, the titles are always the first lines. Let's write this down at 2B real quickly. At 2B, rhetoric, techniques,
Agoraphobia.
not agoraphobic. What I would have you write down here is Dickinson didn't write titles on her poems. So the first line of these poems are going to always be their titles. Do you see the title here? Hope is the thing with feathers. And then you've actually got the poem itself. Got me? Okay. Now, I'm going to suggest something that might shock you a bit. We are actually working with textbooks that will soon be discarded. So you actually have red ink in your hand right now, for a reason. Do you remember how before, when you were working with Psalm of Life, that I said you should be marking on the paper? We're now going to let you practice internal annotation, actually writing in your book. Now, let's point out, hello, listen carefully. When you show up next fall at Worland High School, there will be new textbooks. Last thing you want to do is write in them, because you will get charged $163 for one of those new books. But I'm telling you that because we're the last students to use these books before they are discarded, you get to practice what it's like to be a college student. Why do I say that? College students buy their own books. They are expected to annotate in those books, to write in them. So now you get the chance to practice both internal annotation as well as external annotation. So, well done, Mr. Denise. I'm happy that you were attending. So as we look now at our internal annotations, just like with Psalm of Life, we're making notes. We're also transferring those notes onto our external annotations because that's what you're going to be handing in. Let's now go to a reading of the poem itself. We will look at the poem and then we will exegete or interpret the poem. Hope is the thing with feathers. Read it with me.
Hope
is I'm sorry, Mr. Denise, I should clarify. When I say read it with me, what I mean at this point is, I will read aloud, you will read silently, but with what? The tip of the pen, what? Following the words. Again, if you can't keep up with the fluidity or the flow of my reading, you've got issues and we need to improve your reading speed. On the other hand, if you can keep up with my reading speed, you know you're doing pretty well. Let's read it together. And now we're prepared. Mr. Nash, I just need it to be turned upside down or on its face. That way it doesn't become a distraction for you. Okay? Hope is the thing with feathers. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Now I should point out right away that the poetry of Emily Dickinson, and for those of you who are soon to be juniors, I'll point this out for you. This is not easy poetry. Emily Dickinson's poetry is never easy. But on the page lying there, it looks so simple. It looks so easy. The vocabulary is always easy, but the syntax or the grammar makes her poetry a little bit difficult. Let's start, Mr. Workman, at 2B. I want to point out something about this poem. Dickinson loves to play the game of metaphor. M-E-T-A-P-H-O-R. M-E. So you're writing down. When I start spelling it, you know you're writing it down. M-E-T-A-P-H-O-R. Metaphor. Okay? Now, what is a metaphor? One thing represents something else. One thing represents something else, or compared to something else.
Simile.
A simile is also a comparison. Let's go ahead, since you've injected it, and write the word simile down. Then we'll be able to differentiate between the two. Simile and metaphor are exactly the same thing, with one exception. When we compare as a simile, we use the word like or as. Outstanding. So pleased you're here today for us, Mr. Denise. Like or as. If you say, for example, that Mr. Denise is like an oak tree, that is a comparison. We're not saying an oak tree is what? Strong. I say oak tree, but we live in a place where there are not a lot of oak trees, are there? Oak trees are large, strong trees. Hard to cut them down. But what if I say Mr. Denise is an oak tree? Notice that both comparisons equate Mr. Denise with a tree. But when I use a simile, I will say he is like an oak tree, or he is strong as an oak tree. That's a simile. A metaphor, there's no like or as used. The comparison is used without like or as. For your notes, Dickinson loves the game of metaphors. In this poem, she will create an interesting metaphor. It is there in the opening line. Hope is the thing with feathers. Now, let's point out, she could have said what? At level 1, put it in your notes. What'd she say in the opening line? Hope is what? Hope is a bird, a thing with feathers. Your textbook company, because it was working to try and help you, drew a little bird there for you. Hope is a thing with feathers. We drew a little picture there of a bird, right? Define the word hope real quickly at level 1. Just write down, Mr. Nash, on your annotations at level 1. What is the word hope to you? What does it mean? Don't say it out loud, Mr. Workman, until you've written it on the paper. And then I'll be very happy for you to volunteer a definition for us. You're obviously a word man. You enjoy words. The word hope means what? Stands for what? Find a working definition for you. If you don't know what the word means, this poem is lost on you. If you know what the word means, this poem will have some remarkable meaning for you. Hope. What does it mean, hope? Hope is what? I need a definition of the word. We all use it. I hope this class hurries up and gets over. I hope I can get $1 million. I hope that the girl or the guy will like me, etc., etc. Hope. But define the word for me. Don't give me an example of hope. Define it. Hope is what? A word which represents what concept? What would you say, Mr. Denise? Hope is what?
I put the feeling inside you that gets you through times.
The feeling inside. That's brilliant, by the way. The word feeling is an important one. I'm going to expand on his word feeling to also include the word emotion, which is, of course, right, Mr. McAfee, just the clinical word for the term feeling or emotion. A feeling or emotion, kind of like other feelings and emotion, hope is a feeling or emotion. What else? Having to do with the future, right? Let's write it down. An emotion or a feeling that gestures towards the future. Is that right, Mr. Nash? In other words, if we say, I hope that everything works out. Right now, I may be sitting, thinking, trying to decide exactly how things are going to work out in my private affairs, in my family affairs, in my lover affairs, whatever. And then all of a sudden, I want to try and predict the future. That's hope. 3, hope seems to go along with positive, not negative feelings. We rarely hope for negative things. I'm not saying it can't be used that way, but rarely. We normally, if we are worried about the future, we call that anxiety or dread. If we are excited about the future, we call that hope. Okay? Hope is expecting good. I've given you now an easy working definition. Hope is expecting good. Something positive is going to work out. Not negative. Okay, not negative, positive. Hope is expecting good. But Dickinson will say it a different way. She will say, Hope is the thing with feathers that perches, what's the word mean? You might write it in your book now that we can write in our books. You might circle the word perches. And what does it mean? Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul. Do you know what the word perches means here?
Nudges.
Sorry?
Nudges.
Nudges is close. Mr. McAfee, what do you say? Perches. To perch is to what? Especially if you're a fowl or a bird.
Birds
To
perch on
rest.
branches.
It's sitting, isn't it? Right. It's to sit. When you've watched, it's fascinating, isn't it? A bird can hold on to a small twig and its entire body can be balanced on that twig. Even though the bird's weight looks like it should be far too heavy for the twig, that's called perching. But notice that the bird of hope sits where? Put a square around the word. Where does it sit?
Your soul.
In your soul. Notice we're back to, by the way, a contemporary of Dickinson, Longfellow's idea in Psalm of Life that we have two of us. We have a body, but we've got that other thing. That, for lack of a better phrase, we'll call a soul. Where is hope? It's a bird that sits in the soul. Keep reading. And sings the tune without the words. And never stops at all. Put it in your own words. What'd she say about humans and hope? We are always what? We're always what? We're always hoping, aren't we? Always talking to ourselves. Always hoping. Some of you will say, oh dude, I could quickly right now jump to 3A and make an observation from Old Man in the Sea. Couldn't I? Right? What's a simple observation about that old man and him trying to land that huge fish? He is hopeful, isn't he? He really is, isn't he? He keeps hoping that maybe something's going to work out for him, huh? Right? Question for your notes. Let's jump to 2A real quickly, themes, messages. I want to ask a question. I want you to write down the question, and then I want you to try and provide an answer. Is it possible, do you think, is it possible a person could be hopeless? Write down the question, then think about it for a second. Is it possible that a person, a human being, could actually be hopeless? Or are you inclined to say all humans have to hope for something? Or they wouldn't even get out of bed in the morning. They have to have some level of hope, even if it's really small. They have to have some level of belief things are going to be better in the future. Or they would just quit. They would just quit.
Isn't that why
Give
people
up.
suicide?
Let's go ahead and say it out loud. People take their life when they finally have given up all hope. Or is that true? Many writers of the suicide have pointed out that the very act of taking your life is an act which hopes for relief. Fascinating. I realize Mr. Denise says that's counterintuitive because when you take your life, you have no life. So how could you hope for relief?
Your soul.
Pain, the pain of the soul. The taking of your life even seems to suggest a strange slanted kind of hope. A hope for relief from pain. We would say today, though, the wrong kind of relief. Right? It is not a true relief. Because as the old man in Old Man in the Sea shows us, you have to work through even the worst of times to get on the other side of those times. You can't escape the pain of your life through death. That is not an escape. Notice she says, Mr. Workman, observation.
I'm just saying, technically the Christian way, if you suicide, you do not get relief.
And let's point out Mr. Workman's observation is a religious one of nature, and it's absolutely true, but he limited the observation to a Christian perspective. Mr. McAfee, we point out that there's any number of religions on this planet that will in fact condemn the suicide to some kind of punishment, we might say, right? Absolutely right. The Christian theology, as well as, of course, we're familiar with the Islamic theology and any number of other theologies, Dante, in his famous Divine Comedy, will place suicides in one of the lowest parts of hell. That's true. In fact, Hamlet, in that famous play, is contemplating suicide, but he says he wishes that Providence or God had not fixed his canon or the Bible against self-slaughter. In other words, he knows, if I kill myself, then I'm going to go to hell, just as Dante's Inferno and the great text of Dante's Inferno suggests. Notice here, hope is the thing with feathers. I'm back now reading. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard. Now you want to circle, Mr. Workman, the word gale. The word gale is what word? Do I have anyone that knows this word? Sweetest, let's see if you can guess from the context, right, Mr. Denise? Read it with me and see if you can guess. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. Do you have any idea what this is about? What is the gale? Life is actually what she's talking about. Gale is the same word she uses in the next line. Storm. Storm. Here's the word picture. You're on a boat. Terrible waves coming. Terrible storm. The small bird sits up on the mast and sings through the storm, giving all of the sailors what?
Relief.
Hope. Hope. Somehow we're going to make it through this. Hey, if that little bird can keep singing in the storm, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep going. Emily Dickinson says in stanza 2 of the poem that hope is like a bird that sings in the middle of the storm. And it allows then for the sailors to still have peace, not be so afraid. Question, observation.
Technically, if a bird's singing through a storm, it's just a going out song.
Maybe. But you know what? We're familiar with the most recent of the tornadoes that happened in southern Oklahoma, Moore. There were several stories about birds that continued to try to sing in the middle of that tornado even. Quite remarkably. And I don't know if you've ever been in storms where you could hear birds singing, but Emily Dickinson will point out that when you hear a bird singing, it gives you some sense of hope. It's like, oh, it's going to be okay. Clearly the bird's not worried. Why should we be worried? Third stanza, and then we'll finish. I've heard it. It what? I've heard what? It what? I've heard it. It what? I've heard it. I've heard it. I've heard it. It what? I've heard the song of the bird. I've heard the song of the bird of hope. I've heard it in the chillest land. In other words, in times when I was really sad. Or on the strangest sea. Yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. In other words, she says, the little bird of hope has gotten me through some terrible times, but that little bird of hope has never asked anything back from me. It's never asked a crumb. It's never asked anything from me. In other words, hope is something, she says, I always have had. Are you ready for this now? You only appreciate it when you need it. You only appreciate it, hope, when you need it. And when you are in a bad place, and you are in a bad way, Dickinson says, it's that little bird with his song which allows for you to be able to get through. Finally, that's an important 2A message. This is a poem about how hope helps you to get through, to make it, right? To make it.
Just what I said.
Just what he said. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, guys, you want to now take a little